when that movie came out. Was anything cut from that film?
The studio actually legally couldn't trim it. They couldn't cut anything.
There are television relationships that exist purely on screen, carefully constructed by writers and producers to generate chemistry that keeps audiences coming back week after week. And then there are the rare, genuine bonds that form between actors who spend years in the trenches together, surviving long shooting days, creative disagreements, network pressure, and the relentless grind of producing episode after episode of a show that nobody initially believed in. The relationship between Christina Applegate and Ed O'Neill falls into that second, far more interesting category. For 11 seasons, from 1987 to 1997, these two actors shared a fictional address at 9764 Jeopardy Lane in Chicago, Illinois, playing the long-suffering Peggy Bundy and the defeated, shoe-selling patriarch Al Bundy on Married with Children. The show was loud, intentionally offensive, gleefully anti-family, and wildly successful in ways that nobody at Fox Broadcasting could have predicted when they greenlit what was essentially a middle finger aimed directly at the idealized family sitcoms that dominated television at the time. It ran for 11 seasons and became one of the longest-running live-action comedy series in American television history. But television shows end. Casts scatter. Lives change. And the people who once spent every working day together suddenly find themselves navigating the strange emotional aftermath of a shared experience that defined years of their lives. For Christina Applegate and Ed O'Neill, the post-Married with Children years meant separate careers, separate struggles, and a distance that fans always quietly wondered about. Were they close? Did they stay in touch? Did the warmth that seemed so present on screen actually exist anywhere off of it? The answer to those questions, as it turns out, is far more layered, far more human, and far more moving than most fans ever anticipated. And when Christina Applegate finally opened up about her relationship with Ed O'Neill in the wake of their recent reunion, what she had to say reframed not just how we understand their connection, but how we understand the entire experience of Married with Children from the inside. To understand what Christina Applegate and Ed O'Neill mean to each other, you first have to understand what Married with Children was, not just as a cultural artifact, but as a working environment. When the show premiered on April 5, 1987, it was the very first program to air on the newly launched Fox Broadcasting Company. That fact alone speaks to the level of risk involved. Fox was an unproven network. The show was deliberately counter-programmed against the wholesome family comedies that dominated the other three major networks, particularly The Cosby Show, which was at the peak of its cultural dominance. Married with Children was everything The Cosby Show was not. The family was broke. The marriage was failing in slow motion. The kids were dim and self-absorbed. The humor was broad, sometimes crude, and entirely without redemption arcs. Industry insiders expected it to last one season at best. Critics were dismissive. Some were genuinely offended. A Michigan woman named Terry Ricalta famously launched an advertiser boycott after watching an episode she considered obscene, and the resulting media coverage actually boosted the show's ratings significantly, which is perhaps the most perfectly Married with Children outcome imaginable. The attempt to kill it only made it stronger. For the young actors caught in the middle of all of this, the experience was formative in ways that went far beyond simply landing a regular television role. Christina Applegate was 15 years old when she was cast as Kelly Bundy. 15. She grew up on that set, literally. By the time the show ended, she was 25 years old and had spent a full decade of her developmental years surrounded by cameras, studio lights, network executives, and the unique pressures of playing a character who was frequently the butt of jokes about her intelligence and sexuality. That kind of experience leaves marks, both good and difficult, that take years to fully process. Ed O'Neill, by contrast, came to the show as an adult with theatrical training and some film experience, most notably a small role in the 1986 film Cobra with Sylvester Stallone. He was 31 when the show began and brought a level of craft and intentionality to Al Bundy that transformed what could have been a purely cartoonish figure into something unexpectedly poignant. Al Bundy was a loser by every conventional metric, and O'Neill played him with complete commitment, finding the dignity in the man's hopeless persistence. It was, by any honest assessment, a genuinely remarkable comedic performance sustained over more than 200 episodes. The dynamic between O'Neill's Al and Applegate's Kelly was central to the show's emotional texture. Beneath all the insults and eye rolls, there was a father-daughter relationship that the writers occasionally allowed to breathe with something approaching genuine tenderness. Those moments landed because the two actors trusted each other enough to play them honestly. That trust, developed over years of shared work, didn't simply evaporate when the cameras stopped rolling. When Married with Children ended its run in 1997, the cast went in very different directions. Ed O'Neill had a period of transition before landing what would become his second defining role, Jay Pritchett on Modern Family, which premiered in 2009 and ran for 11 seasons of its own. His career trajectory described a kind of arc that Hollywood rarely delivers so neatly. Two enormous, long-running hits bookending a middle career period that included smaller films and television work. Modern Family gave O'Neill a second wave of cultural relevance and critical recognition, including Screen Actors Guild Awards as part of the ensemble cast. For Christina Applegate, the post-Married with Children years were more turbulent. She worked steadily in film and television throughout the late 1990s and 2000s, building a reputation as a capable comedic actress with genuine range. Her performance in the 1999 film Cruel Intentions demonstrated dramatic ability that surprised audiences who primarily knew her as Kelly Bundy. Her work on the short-lived but critically appreciated television series Jessie showcased a leading woman capability that had always been present but rarely fully utilized during her years on Married with Children. She received Emmy recognition for her guest work on Friends in 2003. Playing Rachel's sharp-tongued sister Amy in a performance that reminded the industry of how precisely she could deploy a comedic moment. But Christina Applegate's story during these years is also a story of significant personal challenge. In 2008, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She was 36 years old. The diagnosis led to a double mastectomy, a decision she discussed publicly with extraordinary candor. She also revealed that she carries the BRCA1 genetic mutation, a disclosure that led to her sister undergoing preventive testing. The way she handled this crisis, openly, practically, with a kind of stubborn refusal to be defined by it, revealed something important about her character that went beyond anything she had ever shown in a scripted role. Then, in 2021, came another devastating disclosure. Christina Applegate announced that she had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, the neurological disease, which affects the central nervous system and can cause a wide range of symptoms including fatigue, pain, and mobility difficulties, had been progressing for some time before the public announcement. She described the period between receiving the diagnosis and going public as among the hardest of her life, characterized by fear, grief, and a slow process of coming to terms with a permanent change to how she experiences her own body. These experiences reshaped her publicly. Applegate became increasingly outspoken about health, about the absurdity of Hollywood's expectations for women, about the particular cruelty of an industry that treats female aging as a kind of professional liability. She was less interested in performing wellness for an audience and more interested in speaking honestly about what living actually felt like. Reunions are complicated things in the entertainment world. They are simultaneously genuine emotional events for the people involved and carefully managed media moments designed to generate coverage and remind audiences that something they once loved still exists in some form. The tension between those two realities can make reunion content feel slightly awkward, slightly performed, like watching people try to recreate a feeling that can only be accessed naturally. The reunion between Christina Applegate and Ed O'Neill was different. Part of what made it different was the context in which it occurred. This was not a light-hearted anniversary special designed to sell nostalgia. This was a meeting between two people, one of whom had been dealing with a serious chronic illness and had been largely absent from public life as a result. The emotional stakes were real before a single word was spoken. Applegate had spoken in interviews about the difficulty of maintaining relationships during her MS journey. The disease had changed her relationship to her own social life in practical ways. Going out was harder. Certain environments were difficult to navigate. The fatigue that accompanies MS can be profound and unpredictable, making the kind of casual social maintenance that sustains friendships over time genuinely challenging. She had been candid about feeling isolated during the worst periods, about the particular loneliness of dealing with something that others cannot fully see or understand. When she described reconnecting with Ed O'Neill in this context, the reunion took on a meaning that had nothing to do with nostalgia for a television show. This was about what happens to the relationships formed in the intense, compressed world of a long-running production when those people re-find each other on the other side of decades of separate living. What remains? What was real? What can be rebuilt or continued? What Applegate said about O'Neill in the wake of their reunion was striking for its specificity. She didn't speak in the vague, publicist-approved language of celebrities discussing former colleagues. She spoke about him as someone who had genuinely shown up, not just performatively but in the consistent, unglamorous way that real support actually looks. She talked about his steadiness, about the way he engaged with her current reality rather than retreating into reminiscence about the version of her he had known 30 years ago. She noted that he didn't treat her illness as something to politely navigate around, but as part of who she is now, which is the kind of acknowledgement that people dealing with chronic illness often report matters enormously. One of the more psychologically interesting aspects of Christina Applegate's reflections on Ed O'Neill is the degree to which she acknowledges that their on-screen relationship had real emotional weight for her at the time it was being filmed. She was, after all, a teenager when she began working with him. Her own childhood and adolescence were, by her own account, complicated. Her parents divorced when she was young. Her mother, Nancy Pretty, was an actress herself, and the entertainment industry was not some distant abstraction for Christina but the actual texture of her daily life from childhood onward. Playing Al Bundy's daughter for 11 years, opposite an actor of O'Neill's experience and commitment, meant spending a significant portion of her formative years in a simulated father-daughter relationship with someone who took the emotional reality of that relationship seriously as an actor. The scenes between Al and Kelly that played with genuine tenderness weren't just scripted moments. They were O'Neill demonstrating care for a young actress who was navigating something genuinely difficult, which is growing up in public, under pressure, in an industry that was not always kind about the transition from child performer to adult actress. Applegate has spoken, with notable directness, about the ways in which some of the humor aimed at Kelly Bundy's appearance and sexuality made her uncomfortable as the young woman playing the role. The jokes about Kelly's intelligence and her relationships with men were central to the show's comedy, and they were funny, but they were also being absorbed by a real teenager who was simultaneously trying to form an identity outside the character. The line between Kelly Bundy's value being defined primarily by her appearance and Christina Applegate being perceived the same way was not always as clear as it should have been, and the entertainment industry of the 1980s and 1990s was not particularly interested in drawing that line carefully. O'Neill, as a trained adult actor with a different relationship to the material, appears to have been one of the people on set who helped her maintain a stable sense of herself as distinct from the character. His own approach to Al Bundy, deeply committed but never self-important, modeled a way of working that took the craft seriously without taking the celebrity seriously. That kind of professional modeling matters enormously to young performers, even if they don't fully recognize it until years later when they look back and identify who helped them develop a sustainable relationship to the work. When Applegate speaks about O'Neill now, you can hear that retrospective recognition. She isn't describing a mentor in any formal sense, but she is describing someone whose presence and approach shaped her in ways that mattered and that she appreciates differently now than she could have at 15 or 20. There is a specific kind of clarity that comes from surviving serious illness. People who have been through it describe something similar in different words: a shift in priorities that is not chosen but imposed, a sudden reduced tolerance for things that don't matter combined with a heightened appreciation for things that do. Christina Applegate has described something like this in interviews following her MS diagnosis, a recalibration of what she has energy for and what she is willing to spend that energy on. This recalibration appears to have influenced how she approaches her relationships with people from her past, including Ed O'Neill. There is a kind of ruthless honesty that illness can introduce into the way we assess our connections with other people. Suddenly, the question of whether a relationship is genuinely sustaining becomes more urgent. Suddenly, the performance of connection, the surface-level pleasantries that serve social function without providing actual nourishment, becomes harder to sustain and less interesting to invest in. What Applegate's post-reunion reflections suggest is that her relationship with O'Neill survived this kind of scrutiny. It wasn't a relationship built on shared professional interest or the mutual benefit of being associated with a successful show. It was something that had genuine roots in who they were to each other during those 11 years of working together, and that, when tested against the honesty that her health circumstances demanded, turned out to be real. O'Neill's own history is not without its complicated chapters. He has spoken over the years about his own relationship to fame and work and the particular challenges of sustaining a career and a sense of self over decades in an industry designed to commodify both. His consistent return to ensemble work, on Married with Children, on Modern Family, in various stage productions, speaks to a preference for collaboration over the solitary project of building a personal star brand. He is, by most accounts of people who have worked with him, deeply loyal to the people in his professional life who earn that loyalty. For Applegate, whose own journey has required leaning on the people around her in ways that illness makes unavoidable, that quality of loyalty in O'Neill appears to have been one of the central things she found herself able to rely on during a difficult period. And the act of being able to rely on someone, of testing the weight of a connection and finding that it holds, is the kind of experience that transforms a professional relationship into something you actually call a friendship. Christina Applegate's public comments following her reunion with Ed O'Neill were not dramatic in the conventional sense. She didn't deliver a tearful speech or make sweeping declarations. What she did instead was something harder and more meaningful. She was specific. She described actual moments. She talked about what he said and how he said it. She talked about what it felt like to be seen by someone who had known a very different version of her and who didn't seem confused or saddened by the distance between that version and the current one. She talked about how he made her laugh. This detail matters more than it might initially seem. Laughter is not a trivial thing for people dealing with chronic pain and fatigue. It is, neurologically and emotionally, a form of relief. The ability to laugh genuinely, not performatively, is something that illness can threaten in ways that are hard to explain to people who haven't experienced the grinding exhaustion that serious disease can impose on the spirit. When Applegate says that Ed O'Neill made her laugh in the way he always did, she is not making a small observation about comedy. She is saying something significant about what it felt like to have a piece of her previous self return to her for a moment. She also spoke about gratitude in a way that felt unforced. Not the celebrity gratitude that gets deployed in award speeches and promotional interviews, but the specific, personal kind that comes from having been through something hard and found that certain things and people you valued before remain valuable on the other side. She expressed gratitude for the years of working together, reframed now with a perspective she couldn't have had at the time. She expressed gratitude for his continued presence in her life in whatever form that takes. She expressed something that sounded very much like genuine relief that the connection had not dissolved in the years of distance between them. For fans who grew up watching Married with Children, who spent formative years with Al and Kelly Bundy as a weekly presence in their lives, there is something quietly profound about this. We invest in fictional relationships when we invest in television, and we do so knowing on some level that the relationships are constructed, performed, not real in the conventional sense. But the people performing them are real. The years they spend together are real. The ways they shape each other are real. And when two of those people find each other again across decades of separate living and discover that something genuine persists, it reflects back something true about the nature of human connection itself. That the bonds formed in the intensity of shared creative work can endure. That the person who witnessed your younger self, even in the strange, pressure-cooked environment of a television production, retains a kind of intimate knowledge that doesn't simply disappear. Christina Applegate's life right now is not the life she planned. The career arc she might have charted for herself in 1997 when Married with Children ended, the films, the continuing television work, the awards, the full creative expression of an actor who had spent her childhood developing a craft, has been significantly altered by her MS diagnosis. She has spoken honestly about what she has lost and what she is still working to hold on to. She has not pretended that it is easy or that she is uniformly at peace with it. But she has also spoken about what remains. The people who matter. The connections that proved real when tested. The laughter that still comes when the right person is in the room. Ed O'Neill is one of those people. After all the years, after all the separate living, after the distance and the silence and the wildly different trajectories their lives took from the same starting point on a Fox soundstage in 1987, he is still one of those people for her. That fact, simple and unspectacular on its surface, is actually the most interesting thing about this entire story. Because what it tells us is something that has nothing to do with celebrity or nostalgia or the entertainment industry's machinery of reunion content. It tells us that the relationships formed in the work, the real ones, the ones built on years of showing up and being present and treating each other with genuine care, those relationships can survive almost anything. They can survive fame and obscurity. They can survive success and failure. They can survive illness and the radical renegotiation of identity that illness demands. Christina Applegate and Ed O'Neill spent 11 years pretending to be father and daughter in front of millions of people. And somewhere in all that pretending, something real happened between them. It took decades and illness, and a reunion neither of them could have imagined back when Al Bundy was selling shoes in Chicago, for them to fully see what that something was. Now